So we talked about early life in New York. You recently moved to Miami, where currently you said there's like tropical rain, but it's not too bad. How has that transition been going from, a big city like NYC and kind of timing it well with COVID, I'm assuming, but
I just think at this time of my life, like for where I'm at, I was just ready for that change. Before that, if we go back to like 8 years ago, I made the move from Sydney to New York, and that was a really significant change for me. I was really young, and that was an incredible experience and learning that prepared me for entrepreneurship eventually. I got to New York with nothing, no job, didn't really know anyone, and I just kind of was working it out along the way. And eventually worked in sports with the Brooklyn Nets and Barclays Center, which was a dream. But before I got to that point, New York chewed me up and spat me out a few times, which was a really it was a great experience overall because it taught me a lot. And New York kind of was my university or my college. I went to real college as well, but I learned more than anything going through that in New York, which really prepared me for entrepreneurship. And I spent 7 or 8 years in New York grinding, hustling, and met a Florida girl, which is why now I'm in Miami. But after that 7 or 8 years of grinding in a city that is amazing, but also is very tiring, I was ready for this change to kind of get to Miami and have a bigger place to live in, day-to-day sunshine. And that kind of releases pressure a little bit. You're still in your own little working cooker pressure startup environment, but once you kind of disconnect from that on the weekend or whatever, Miami is a great place to be for work-life balance.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I must imagine, to your point about like giving you a real life MBA, right? That's why they say if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. But especially moving from like Miami's more similar to Australia, obviously, but moving from Sydney to New York, dude, that's a pretty big shift. And I will tell you, literally, I haven't been to Australia yet, but every one of my friends who has been to Australia has literally never wanted to go anywhere else anymore. I had a buddy of mine, dude. He booked like a 3-week vacation. Literally, like 4 months later, he booked another vacation back to Australia from Canada. And it takes time. It's pretty expensive. Like that's how much he loved it. So for you, I mean, that must have been an even bigger transition going from Aussie right to NYC straight to the big city.
Yeah, I was only 22 when I left Sydney, or I'm from a town called Wollongong, about an hour south of Sydney, and
okay,
I was just at that point I just wanted a sense of adventure. I wanted to work in the major leagues. I wanted the big bright lights of America and New York City. Sydney's incredible. Australia's great. I still think I'll end up back there at some point. I just don't know when. I'm coming up on 10 years since I've left there, and I think my mum hopes that Miami is one step closer to going home. But yeah, Sydney and Miami definitely have some comparables, and they're similar cities. But yeah, that shock of new environment, of moving from Sydney to New York is exactly what I was after. It was kind of that getting out of the comfort zone experience that I was looking for.
Like a fresh new start. And it's what better way to do that than physically changing your environment, right?
And especially a city like New York, where it literally feels like at some points, where I was making progress with the startup and going from meeting to meeting, it kind of felt like a business playground where you're just like, I'm running around this city, going from meetings with these huge corporations or investors or whatever. It was just a lot of fun, but it also wears you down.
It's true. Yeah, I mean, that's why you can never have it all, right? I mean, you can't have your cake and eat it too, kind of as the saying goes. But what I wanted to ask about as well is kind of in your early life, Matt, especially in Australia, like you were always around sports, right? You mentioned the Brooklyn Nets, which I haven't forgotten. I want to get back to, but you were always around sports, especially from the business perspective. Where did that come from? Like, did you know even from an early age that you wanted to work in sports?
Yeah, I did. I think so. I think I grew up a big rugby fan, just by way of my dad being a big rugby fan. So I grew up a very, very passionate Sydney Roosters fan, and that was kind of me and my dad's thing. We'd go to games. If we weren't going to games, we were watching the Roosters game every week, and that made me a really, really strong. That was the first team I was a really strong fan of, and then I played rugby all my life as well up until I was 18, 19, and then I originally thought I wanted to get into sports on the science side. So I started studying exercise science. I thought I want to be a physiotherapist or something like that. Pretty quickly into that degree in year 2, I started doing the chemistry and the anatomy, and I was like, get me out of here.
That's what gets us all, my friend. That's what gets us all.
And that's when I transferred to a business degree, a sports business degree, and just never turned back from there. I really love that, and that as well. I think that first experience of really pivoting in my life in some capacity, because it was a big decision to change universities, change degrees. It would put me back a year. That was the first time where I realized it's okay. It's actually a good decision to go off course a little bit and pivot a little bit and be flexible. That was the first time I did that with success.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we can talk about pivoting as a startup, but did you take those lessons from navigating different careers back into the startup world? Is that kind of where you took it from?
Yeah. Now that we're talking about it, I'm kind of realizing that. Exactly. Yeah, but I think I treat startup life the same way. GameOn started as a B2C focused business, our own GameOn apps. Today we're completely B2B, building white label experiences, because along the way we've been flexible and cognizant of opportunities and being ready to go in different directions if an opportunity calls us. So yeah, I think I definitely took that from a positive experience of doing that with my studies.
And before we get to the full GameOn story, what I did want to ask you is, you've worked at multiple sports teams, right? And franchises. You mentioned the Brooklyn Nets. You've also worked for the Brooklyn Kings, which is the rugby league. So many different organizations in the U.S. and Australia. Curious, which one to you stood out the most, and what was maybe one thing that you took away from that sports organization that you loved working with?
Yeah, so the Brooklyn Kings, actually, just to explain that, I mentioned I got to the US with no job or anything established, and it was really, really tough to break into the sports world in America. Yeah. So I needed something on the resume. So I actually started the Brooklyn Kings as a team in the North American Rugby League, the USARL, and that was kind of my blank canvas from a sports business standpoint. I built the brand, I recruited players, I sold sponsorship, $1,000 sponsorships, and that helped me get a start in my career. I then got a job at Lead Dog, which is an agency, CSM Sport and Entertainment, and then worked for the Brooklyn Nets, or the parent company, Brooklyn Sports and Entertainment, who owns Brooklyn Nets, Barclays Center. We had the Islanders at the time in the NHL, so I was selling across all of that, and that really was the most exciting one for me, because it was kind of, it signaled my entry into the major leagues, so to speak, and that's what I wanted. That's what I moved to America for. So I kind of felt like I achieved what I moved here for, and I didn't really know I wanted to get into startup world at that point. So to me, I was reaching the pinnacle of what I wanted to do, and and the Nets sucked at the time as well. They were winning 12 games a year, so it wasn't a winning franchise, but it was super professional. The Barclays Center is a beautiful arena, and I got to go there whenever I wanted, and swipe my tag at the front, get in and watch whatever event I wanted, and that I was super grateful for. It was a really exciting time of my career, and that I think was the most exciting role before I took a dive into startups.
Dude, I was gonna say, can you imagine right now if you worked for the Brooklyn Nets?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean,
come on, man.
It was a tough loss the last week, but yeah, it would be a great time to be there. Some of my former colleagues are still there, and very happy for them. Now selling into a winning franchise and a few superstars versus what we had to sell before.
It's a little bit easier, right? When you have three of the top 5 players in the NBA. I don't think it would be that difficult, but nonetheless, that's awesome, man. So you kind of like wrap the career side of your sports stint almost with the Brooklyn Nets, if I'm not mistaken, or Brooklyn Sports Entertainment, to put it more broadly. When did that, did you have the idea for GameOn roughly at that point, or was this always kind of a worm really seeding in your brain? It just kind of evolved over the years. I'm curious.
Yeah, so after Brooklyn Nets or BSC, I went to a company called Lifestyle, which is a music festival company. So they own a bunch of music events around the US. And I was only there for a year, but it was within that year that I really started to start thinking about doing something, or just building something and getting started. I knew it would change and evolve over time, but right. I also knew that before I left the US, I wanted to give something of my own a go, and I wanted to build. So just started drawing screenshots on a piece of paper and writing a business plan and starting to show people that business plan and getting feedback, and then it kind of snowballed from there. And that's what when people ask like what's one of the key things that or pieces of advice you would give, it's almost always just get started. Just find a way to get started. If you spend $100 and get a logo created, or write the business plan and show someone, it all just really snowballs from there and manifests from there. So I think over that year it really did manifest into a point where I was excited and motivated to quit and work full time. And that was almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years ago in October. Yeah.
Well, I did want to ask you, I mean, I love that piece of advice, because it really does stem from just getting started, whichever way. And funny enough, your ticker is GET, which is GET. I kind of like that. I don't know if that was the point, but nonetheless, it could be an analogy between us. I'm curious though, dude, like getting started is difficult, don't get me wrong, but I think in at least in my experience, it's always been a bit easier, right? And I think in most people's cases, like they start something, right? The first 30 days are like that honeymoon. I'm super excited. I get a logo going. And then all of a sudden things like falter, right? The consistency kind of goes out the window. So I'm curious for you, within that year period, because that's what people listening, aspiring founders are kind of clinging to most from you, is like how within that year period do you actually make small increments of improvement, but also stay motivated on something that still isn't really real yet?
Yeah. The other thing that I talk about a lot, and my advisor Shauna Griffiths, who's awesome, she's a mentor as well. She talks about this a lot. We talk about it a lot. Is pain tolerance. It's being okay with no's is a must, and this is where a sales background really benefited me, because I learned like to get a no, and actually a fast no is the best next thing to a yes, and the drawn out no's or even worse, silence, are the absolute worst. So like just being okay with rejection and having the pain tolerance kind of helps you get through all of that and gives you consistency and persistency. And that is a must. Like I wouldn't still be here if it wasn't for the pain tolerance and not caring about those no's and just moving on and on to the next, especially through a time like COVID, where like you need that pain tolerance, where like almost everyone in startup world hits rock bottom, and it's really tough. Having that pain tolerance is super, super important. And if anyone's young enough, and like just out of college and they know they want to be an entrepreneur, I always say like, first go and do sales for a year. Like just get a sales job selling anything, because it's going to give you that pain tolerance and becoming comfortable with rejection that you need to keep going as a founder or as an entrepreneur.
So true, man. Like you're almost kind of desensitized, right? not so much oblivious to the nose, but you also, it's kind of like any profession, right? A doctor becomes desensitized to do surgery and perform surgery on a human body, as an example, right? Bankers get desensitized with money because they deal with it so much. So $100 million for a banker might not be as significant as to someone who's never physically maybe or electronically dealt with it. So I feel like that's a really good point. And for you, apart from like the start in sales, now when you're a startup founder and you have a lot of weight on your shoulders, dude, obviously, what is your outlet, right? Like when things don't go your way, when things feel like you've hit rock bottom, or when it's kind of like like we've hit a bump here in the road, what is your outlet to get back on track, basically?
I mean, there's a couple of I think answers to that. The first is just in general, like just being able to learn the lesson pretty quickly from a no and just move right on is important. Like just straight in the rearview mirror. An example is, you know, we're pitching. We're white labeled B2B, and we're a part of some pitches right now where a minimum guarantee is part of it. So like they're not paying us, they put out an RFP. They're a massive league or tournament, sports tournament in the world, and they're asking the supplier to actually pay them a minimum guarantee and then share revenue afterwards. Like there's a big sharing revenue opportunity. We went through that process. Our minimum guarantee was big for us, but it was 7 figures. But then we quickly realized that others in that process were like 10 times ours, 10 times our minute, that we just, because they're very well capitalized businesses, we're competing. It's nice to be in that ring with them and have our hat in the ring. But ultimately, we spent all this time on this proposal, and then our minimum guarantee was nowhere near that, which was really disheartening at the time. It was really to be talking to this international organization and then find out that we put all this creative effort into it and then be hit with, we love your ideas, but sorry, you're out of the process because your minimum guarantee is tiny compared to these others. That was something that we had to, quickly recognize, hey, we're not going to be able to compete at this moment with those offers. So that's a learning, for who we should be targeting in our pipeline right now. But let's move on. It was easy. It was easy to mull over that for a week or get upset over it, and we spent all this time. But you know what? We're going to use those exact concepts for other partners. So that's fine. So that's an example of just like straight in the rearview mirror, and on you go. The other is, which is more broad, is to just to be able to have that mentality and be able to move on quickly, and just in general be of a positive mindset. I think you have to have outlets in general personally. And listen to your body to understand what it is. So don't like read a book and realize that Steve Jobs would do this, and this, so I need to do that. I need to get up at 4 a.m. because this guy did it. No, I think you need to listen to yourself. So I know that I need like 8 hours of sleep, ideally. I can probably work off of 7. I'm jealous of those who can work off of 4 or 5, but I need 8. Otherwise, I'm not going to be working optimally. So I need to do that. I need to exercise, and I need to eat well during the week. And that's my outlet to ensure that I'm have a positive mindset.
Yeah, I love that last part, man. That part is so key about listening to your body, but also like it's okay to look at what Matt is doing and what's prescriptive to Matt, but just know that that's not like, take it kind of with a grain of salt, because I feel like now we're in a place, dude, where I'm sure like David Goggins and Gary Vee, and those are great guys, dude. They're inspirational figures. Don't get me wrong, but I think like it's not talked a lot about finding your own stride and doing the right thing. I'm not saying like slouching on the couch all day, but to your point, you don't have to wake up at 3 a.m. just to be part of the 5 a.m. club if that's not conducive to where you are at the moment. I think that's so important. As a startup founder, I think people actually have to listen more to that, and be more in tune with how you feel, Yeah,
I 100% agree. And, I went through a period of maybe a couple of years where I was like why aren't I a morning person? Why can't I get up at 5 or 6 and kind of feeling guilty about it?
Yeah.
But then I don't know, a switch kind of flicked, and I realized, you know what, like I can get up at 7:30 or 8 and still get a lot of stuff done and work on my schedule and still be efficient. And I am, because I'm achieving these things. And then I started realizing, it's more about listening to your body versus prescribing what works for someone else. So and it's refreshing to hear someone else that kind of speaks to it. I get the feeling it's not the first time you've spoken about this or thought about it. I think we as entrepreneurs need to talk about that more, because young entrepreneurs coming through think that they're not good enough, or they're not making it, or they're not worthy, or they're not built for it because of things like that. So,
yeah, well, that's kind of the saying goes, like, comparison is the thief of joy, right? So that's kind of where I think where it comes from. And you always want to model yourself. So to your point about Steve Jobs, like, you have these figures, but I think now we're starting to change that narrative. But we need to be more outspoken about that, dude. Because I think, like, now you're talking about mental health and stuff, which I want to get to a bit later in the podcast. But before we lose track, so you build up this idea for the first year. It starts seeding in your mind. What exactly pointed you to the solution of GameOn? Was it like a personal pain point, or was it something that you realized from all the different sports organizations you were part of?
I just wanted to it might have been a combination of everything, but I just wanted to make it easier and faster and safer to kind of get in the game and be part of the game through predictive gaming. I wanted to find a way to compete that didn't cost money, that didn't break the bank, that was legal. And then the business opportunity, kind of the overarching opportunity, was, sports betting becoming legal in North America, the biggest market in the world, one of the only markets where it's not legal right now. It's kind of a once in a lifetime market or opportunity that's kind of about to go crazy. So that all combined just got us going and drove me to get the original business up and running.
So you get it up and running now. For someone who maybe hasn't come across GameOn, how would you explain it in like a 2-sentence paragraph?
So GameOn works with content owners, so that's teams, leagues, TV networks, OTT platforms, to make their content more social and engaging through prediction games, so predictive gaming.
Gotcha. And I know that you have, I thought that was really cool. You're working with like Comcast, Bravo, The Real Housewives. These are pretty big names to have on, especially in the early stages of a startup, dude. So interesting to navigate through those.
Yeah. And like I've touched on here, we started off as this consumer-facing business.
Right.
And when I say consumer-facing, we were our own GameOn app that you could download on the store. The business model was about getting millions of users and advertising and in-app purchases. And then COVID hit, and that's when, for the first time ever, we started doing B2B white label. And the reason why was because we were running out of money. We had pretty much $0 in the bank account. This is my rock bottom moment. During COVID, there were only a few of us, but I hadn't paid myself in maybe a year at that point. I'd racked up credit cards, paying rent with that, and then my developers, two developers that needed to be paid, and we had no money in the bank, and I cash advanced the last of my personal credit card to pay them. And then within a few weeks, we did the white label deal with NBCUniversal and Bravo, and then it all slowly started to turn around. And when we did that first white label deal, I realized the B2B opportunity. I realized that not only sports, but TV networks want, and reality TV need and want this type of solution. And then over the next year or so, we fully became this B2B business, and we did the go public deal, which I'm sure we'll get into. But that's when it was really a COVID induced pivot to B2B that, you know, we've loved every minute of since, and we're really getting a good roll on now.
And so I definitely want to hit on a couple points here, but just quickly for people again listening, like if we can paint a picture of what you can actually help with someone like the Real Housewives as an example, how you can help on the gamification front. I'd love if you can kind of clarify that roadmap.
Yeah, so our platform is the initial base is a prediction game experience. So before the episode or before the show or before the game, you make predictions like who'll score the first touchdown, who'll win, will there be a proposal this episode, will Rachel receive a rose, things like this that'll happen throughout the game. And it looks and feels like our partner's environment. So it's fully white labeled.
White labeled, yeah.
And our platform is 100% programmatic. So our engine writes the predictions, grades and results them in real time, updates leaderboards, and then pays out any prizes, like could be cash, it could be meet and greets, it could be digital coupons for their partners, whatever it might be. So there's no additional lift for their internal team. That's often the biggest hurdle in the sales process, is that the production team needs to be on board, someone's producing on there, and we cut that right out of the process and make it really, really easy to get up and running. All they have to do is approve, approve the content. And then because our product is built, tested, and in the market, we can be up and running in a matter of weeks. So it can be, really, really fast for us to turn around and get up and running with any given partner. Now, predictive gaming is our core. We're starting to tie in, now that we're capitalized, we have a growing team, we're starting to gamify other industries, I would say, such as collectibles and NFTs. Now, while we'll never be an NFT blockchain company, but we sure as hell want to gamify NFTs because we know that our partners want it, fans want it. So we've started tying that in as a layer to our prediction game. So for example, if we're working with let's use a soccer league like a Bundesliga or FIFA or La Liga as our partner, and you want to choose Messi to score the first goal in a World Cup game, you need the Messi collectible to make that pick. You need to drag it across. Yeah. If you don't have it, you go to the marketplace, you can open a pack, you can go trade it with a fan, buy it on the marketplace. If you have a more rare or scarce Messi NFT, you get more points. If you have a Messi NFT where he's actually scoring a header as a goal and he scores a header in the game, you get even more bonus points. So it actually gives the NFTs a utility in our prediction game. And we've started, we've just announced that. We're just going to market with it, getting really, really good feedback on it. And that's an example of how we're going to take this product forward. At our core, we're a predictive gaming company. That's what we'll always be. But we want to gamify other things like NFTs and collectibles.
That's amazing. I love that the NFT spin, actually, because even though I know it's a token, but you're actually unlocking like the utility of it, aside from it being like an investable asset, that can grow in value and whatever. But I think when they first launched, people just assumed like, okay, well, I'll own this like 8-second snippet of LeBron dunking and I'll just gain value. It's kind of like what happened with Bitcoin, but you're turning that into a utility of a digital token that can be used for something else as well.
Yeah, exactly. We think utility is paramount. It's it's a must. Exactly. And I think after now we're seeing a bit of a cash grab going on with just minting and selling. Yeah. Now these IPs like the teams and leagues and networks, they're really looking for something that actually has utility, not only in the game but in real life as well. So if you're able to collect a Messi NFT, an Argentina jersey NFT, and then a Messi celebration, then you get VIP tickets and a customized message from Messi himself. So giving it a utility in real life is another step that the IP partner can do. And by the way, the person spearheading this for us is our chief product officer, who comes from that background. So he was head of sports at Dapper Labs and built NBA Top Shot.
No way.
He was kind of the mastermind behind that. And before that, he built FIFA at EA Sports. So you can kind of see how that background is kind of now, manifesting into some of the products that we're building today.
That's dope, dude. That's really cool. Before we get to the public side, one more question I got. So I don't want to let this skip. That stretch, you hit rock bottom. You're basically maxing out on your credit cards, dude. I was like sweating when you were telling the story. I'm like, I'm getting anxious just hearing it. But it's a story that's common with true bred entrepreneurs. The question though I have that always wrestles, right, is like, how do you, when you have these two roads, right? You're rock bottom. You have these two roads. Do you stop and you cut your losses, or do you keep going? And knowing when to do either is the really, really tricky part. And I want to make sure that you can at least describe that, so that if someone's listening, they kind of hear about your roadmap internally in terms of how you thought about it.
Yeah, I mean, I battled with myself a little bit on that at the time, but I was never going to call it quits. Maybe if it stretched on another 3, 6, 9, 12 months, maybe, but I just, again, the pain tolerance was there, the belief was still there, and I was invested enough that I just wasn't ready to call it quits, right now. So I don't know, because this is my first business. This is my first startup. So I don't know what it's like to call it quits. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't, battling with myself at the time on if it is time to call it quits.
I like that, man. Yeah, I mean, sometimes that, when I'm just trying to think, like, maybe if you had like 3 or 4 other case studies where you hadn't called it quits and things didn't go, back up, I guess, maybe that would have influenced your decision. So sometimes maybe not opening the door and seeing what's on the other side sometimes can help you.
Yeah, I was having the thoughts in my head, like, in how many months do I go home to Australia? In how many months do I, or do I apply for jobs? Like, I was starting to have those thoughts. But then, yeah, I mean, eventually it just started turning around, and I think it goes back to like that flexibility and the pain tolerance, as I said, but like the flexibility and understanding that. And this is another reason why you should just get started. Just understanding that a lot of people think that there's only one way to win, and they get obsessed with that, and and it holds them back because they don't want to mess it up. When in reality, there are lots of ways to win. You just have to find one. And that's where the flexibility comes in, and the and being flexible and open to going down the B2B path, and doing everything we're doing now was because we're reacting to opportunities, and we're just trying to find a way to win, not obsessing over the one way that we think is the only way to win.
100%. So we're 3 years in, dude. 3 years ago, this was just an idea that you were wrestling with. Fast forward, now you're publicly listed on the CSE, which, for those who don't know, is also a junior exchange similar to TSXV in Canada, under the ticker GET. Fucking love the ticker, dude. I gotta say, good on you, man. How does it feel to be a public company? You're now listed, so you're a couple of months in. So it's actually a good time to ask you, one, how the process was getting to market, and then 2, how the process has been now that you're on the market.
It's been a really, really positive experience so far. Like, very liberating. I kind of, the one way to describe it is that I feel like shackles have been taken off, because just 9 months ago it was like 3 of us full time, and then now we're 13 full time, and the resources have really just been unlocked for us, and it's amazing to me because I had no idea that this was even a path or a way to access capital. Before we did this, I had never bought a share in my life. Like, I didn't even have a Robinhood account, nothing. So, it's really unbelievable how much we've been able to unlock from a resources standpoint, and then from a team standpoint. That's been incredible for us. It wouldn't have been possible without Victory Square Technologies, who had really been that public market partner for us. They own a lot of the company. They raised the 5.8 million. Obviously, I was part of that, but they spearheaded that in pre-IPO fundraising. We're raising another round now that we're just starting to talk about. Maybe it'll have been closed by the time this goes live, but yeah, I mean, just it's been a really great experience. It was, the requirements and the months leading into it were obviously really hectic, and I think it was probably just what you need to do for such a small company. Felt like overkill at the time, but it's just the part of the process. You have to go through all those audits and everything. But then it's totally outweighed by the capital and resources we've been able to unlock. Anyone in the US listening to this, there's a misconception or a lack of understanding around the Canadian markets and how they're used for startups. This public listing wasn't an exit or a payday for any of us. We're all totally invested in the long term. All it did was give us a bunch of capital. We've been able to bring on awesome people in the day-to-day team, but then from an advisory and director standpoint, we've been able to bring on people who we never would have been able to, because the stock is tangible. They don't need to worry about the exit. They are fully aligned and participate in the upside of everything they bring to the business. So it's been great for us. I think more American startups, US-based startups, should totally understand and at least do their diligence on the TSE, the CSE, and the TSX. Because it's an option. It's not a sure path to success.
Exactly.
But it's absolutely something that they should be considering next to traditional VC.
Dude, it's so true, and I love the way you pointed. Well, first of all, again, I said it pre-recording, but on the record, man, congrats. I'm thrilled for you, and I know how long the journey has been, and it's exciting to see, regardless, in the Canadian cap markets, more thriving US companies coming to us. And I think one of the things you pointed out, well, a couple for sure, but one of the things, that kind of cumbersome road to get to being public is not easy, right? I think part of that is like the market safeguarding themselves by making sure that these are solid companies coming to market, and for retail institutional investors to get involved and be confident that these are quality companies, right? I think the other thing to your point, and I've heard this from other CEOs, is like, although you kind of question like, is this all, worth it? Once you're public though, and you have all those internal controls, you're organized, how much it helps post being public, right? With conversations, if you want to do another financing, it's all transparent, it's all there, it's all neatly organized. You spend less time on like the fluff basically, and you just get to the point. And that has actually a lot of an advantage, even if you're actually earlier in your life cycle. So I think that's really good. And you pointed out obviously some of the other benefits as well. To your point, it's funny how, as a metaphor, dude, this is usually, and I used to say this, like, this is the Super Bowl or the Emmys, and it kind of makes it seem like it's the final chapter. But for many companies, this is only the beginning, right? And certainly for you, this is only the tip of the spear, man. So it's exciting to see what's going to happen next. Yeah,
exactly. And now we're just fully focused on driving, using that capital we've unlocked to drive value for our shareholders, and drive all the key metrics that we need to grow the share price and the stock and the value for everyone. So no, it's an exciting time, and I'm sure we need to have this conversation again in 6 months or 12 months, because I'm sure there are hurdles that I'm going to have to overcome. But right now, it's been a fantastic, really great experience for us.
Hey, dude, I'm pumped, man. I can't wait to have you on. That's the beauty of having this podcast. It's like chapter 1, 2, 3, the more the merrier. But Matt, again, want to thank you. For everyone listening, founder and CEO of GameOn, CSE, GET is the ticker. Appreciate you being on here, man, and sharing the story.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Can't wait to be back again.